The next tool that I want to introduce you to is the Type tool. You'll find it over here. It's a big capital letter T, and you click on it. And what I like to do when I'm using the Type tool is to create a text box for myself and then work within that text box. And then I always have a sense then of how much room my font, my text area is taking up. So I like to click and drag out, and let's say I want the font to be that big, I want it to take up that much room. I'll let go. It fills it automatically with what's called lorem ipsum. It's basically vaguely Latin looking gibberish, and it's just meant to be a placeholder. So you can, once you've done that, hit delete, and now I can start typing. So let's say I'm going to name my product Yum Brands. And now I want to start playing with font. So notice I typed and I have this little cursor tool that only shows up when I'm inside the text box I've created. If I go outside of the text box I built already and I click and drag, it's just going to want to build another text box for me, and it's going to be hard to get back to the original writing and start to edit it. So make sure that you're in your original text box and your cursor tool looks like this, not like this. So with it like that, I can click and select the text I've written already, and I want to play with different fonts. So I'm going to go up to Type, Font, but this is my favorite way because notice I get these samples here showing me how that font actually looks. So I can come through, and let's say I'm looking for something kind of retro and playful looking. Could maybe go with Bauhaus 93. Maybe I want something a little more elegant and simple. Maybe I want Century Gothic. Or maybe I want something kind of childlike and handwritten, and you can do one of the cheesier fonts like Chalk Duster. I think I'm going to go back up to that more playful one. Bauhaus 93. Let's see how that looks. Now if I want to change the size, I can go up here to the character panel. I'm going to click on that. And right here is where I can change the size of my font. This changes the spacing between lines of font. This won't be relevant here because I only have one line of text. This over here sets the tracking, which means the space in between the characters. So notice as I go down, each letter is just getting a little bit closer to the other letter. I could go the other way and have them be spread out more. I can also change scale, so I can have these be really tall. Stretch them out. Let's get that back to 100%. I could also have them be really wide. So as you're choosing fonts, I would ask that you not keep the font as it is, but you tweak it and adjust it and make something a little different about it. You can have it all caps. You can have small caps. If I only select part of this, go back to my character panel, and I make the rest of it a superscript or a subscript. See what that does. You can also do an underline or a strike through, or both. So there is a lot you can do to adjust a font within the character panel, but my favorite thing to do is actually change it from a font into shapes and edit it individually with the selection tools and direct selection tools. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to get out of the Type tool, and one big thing I want you to notice with Adobe Illustrator is when you select a tool, you are stuck in that tool. So if I tried to select this and move it, I'm stuck in the type tool and I can't really move. I can just create more text boxes. And that can drive you crazy. So always make sure when you select a tool and you're ready to start making some adjustments to it, that you move to the selection tool. If I want to change this text box now, I can do it. And that just brings it a little closer to the actual text itself, so I don't have all this extra stuff around. Let me show you the difference between doing it this way and taking the type tool. Remember last time I dragged out a text box. What if I just click once? It spits out lorem ipsum for me, and it makes a text box that remains close to the text I type no matter what. So let's say I type hi here. And now with the selection tool, if I wanted to readjust just the type box around it, it actually ends up distorting the text. As opposed to this one, where all it does is changes the size of the type box, and then I can just add more. If you ever want to adjust your text with the selection tool, you can always double click within your text box, and then it puts you back into the type tool automatically, but then just make sure you get back to your selection tool when you want to. So that's why I like to drag out a text box first, because personally it bothers me that I can't readjust the text box after I've created it this way. I'm going to delete that. I'm going to work with this. I've selected it using my selection tool. Now that's important. It won't work if you're in the type tool. So I've selected it using my selection tool. I'm going to go to the type menu, and I'm going to choose create outlines. Notice now, I no longer have a text box, and these words, these letters, are each highlighted individually. Watch what happens if I choose the direct selection tool now. I suddenly see that these are shapes. They're no longer blocks of text. I have turned these into a series of shapes, and now if I go to edit them, they'll edit like shapes instead of like text. So I'm holding down shift as I drag and it scales it up just like it would if it were a box. I can now drag this way and it distorts it. I can hold down shift and it scales it. If I go to my direct selection tool, I can actually come in and select some of these specific points and drag those up. I'm holding down shift to select multiple points on a shape. So normally the selection tool wants to just select one point at a time. What I did when I adjusted the Y was I selected one point, I held down shift, and I selected another point, and now I have them both selected. I can drag them. So I love changing fonts into shapes so I can edit them further. And this is really what I'm going to be asking you to do. But the big thing to know here is I can't turn this back into a font once I've done this. So make absolutely sure you're happy with the font you chose, because if I select this now with the selection tool, I don't have the option to change the font anymore. If I come here and I click on a different font, it's not going to do anything to this because this is no longer type. In the mind of Adobe Illustrator, this is now a set of shapes, and I am adjusting them as I would adjust shapes. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're really happy with your font before you do this. So let's just show you again with the type tool. I like to draw out a box. It'll fill it automatically with lorem ipsum. I'm going to type in what I want it to say. You'll notice if you type something too big for your text box, it's going to disappear. If you want to see it, it's still there, you just have to expand your text box. So I'm going to go to the selection tool now, drag out my text box, and there's the rest of what I wrote. Back to the text tool. I can change the font here through the character panel as well. And now you actually see previews using your own text. So I can even see what I wrote. and try to find the best font. You can do this cheesy Apple Casual one. Now remember, you can tweak things through the character panel. You can change the size, and you can change the spacing between the words, and you can change the height and width. But if you turn it into a series of shapes, you can do that as well. So I'm going to show you again. I'm going to go to Type, make sure you have the selection tool, go to Type, and create outlines. And now these are shapes that I can edit and adjust. Another thing I want you to notice is it automatically groups this as one unit. So with the selection tool, it's hard to select individual letters. If I wanted to take even just one word and adjust its size, I couldn't do that because it's all going to adjust as one unit. I can use my direct selection tool, but what I actually want to do is be able to make some of these adjustments with the selection tool and not have to go into the direct selection tool. Because the direct selection tool is really best for editing individual points within shapes, but what I want to do is just regroup these shapes so I can edit them all at once. So with my selection tool, I'm selecting this, and I'm going to right-click, which is 2 fingers on the trackpad, and I'm going to click Ungroup right here. Now I can, with the selection tool, select each letter as an individual object. I can come to this S, and I can scale it up. I can take this whole word by clicking and dragging over it, and then dragging it over. Take this whole word, hold down Shift to scale it up, drag it over. And let's say I wanted to manipulate these words all together, and I didn't want to worry about accidentally moving one of the letters away from the rest of it. So I wanted the word foods to always move as a group, not as individual letters. I can click and drag over it to select the whole word. And notice when I right-click with 2 fingers on the trackpad, I don't see the group option immediately here, but there are other ways you can find it. You can actually go to the Object menu and use Group here, or you can use the keyboard shortcut Command-G to group. Now I've grouped the word foods. I can't select those individual letters anymore, but I can move the word as a whole unit. If I want to change that, right-click, Ungroup. Now I can select individual letters. You can ungroup and regroup as much as you want, so now I want this grouped again as a unit. I'm going to go up to Object, Group, and again this will move all together as one. If I'm happy with my logo, then you may want to select all of it, right-click, and group it. And now that will stay as a single unit. So I want you to start experimenting with the Type tool and with different fonts, and try turning those fonts into shapes and playing around with the scale, the group and ungroup tool, your selection tool and direct selection tool to change them up a little bit. Now, even though I've turned these into individual objects, I can still come in with this direct selection tool and select points and move things around. So I'm going to hold down Shift to select multiple points so I get this whole bottom part of the N. I'm going to make sure I'm holding one of them and drag down. I can change that shape. Holding down Shift to select multiple points, grabbing this side over here, and dragging it out. So that's a lot to experiment with. I want you to try this out and play around with text a little.